Hey, happy Firecrack Eve, everyone. Just thought I would come in here and answer another question, this time from Trevor Barrett, who asks a very good one, actually, about which titles make it worth it. Which titles make me say to myself, "This is why I'm a completionist." I'm gonna try to channel my inner Dice K here without stealing his shtick too much. So I've never done this, so forgive the ramblings if that's what it is. But if it's too bad, you'll never see this anyway. So what I did was I just grabbed about a dozen off the shelf that kind of are the epitome of different reasons that I've been thinking about and why I'm a criterion completionist, and how that probably is confusing to some people, but not to me. So here we go. And these are pretty much in reverse order because I took them off the shelf in the other order. Okay, first one here, very, very recent, A Face in the Crowd. This is one of those movies that I've known about since I was a kid, known about it by reputation, known about it from some analysis that I've done, reading about films over the years, but also one of those films that I'm always going to get to one day. And because Criterion was kind enough to put this into the canon, it was something that moved, hundreds of spots of my queue for me to finally watch it. And I found this to be one hell of a movie, prescient and all those things. But again, from a completionist standpoint, something I'm very, very happy that they brought into the canon so that myself and many others could be fully exposed to it. All right. The next one I have is also fairly recent. Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. Ooh. Now, why does this one make me happy to be a completionist? Well, because back in 1991 when this came out, and I was all of 26, 27 years old, I saw this, didn't like it, didn't get it, thought it was not a worthy successor or precursor to the TV show, and probably never would have went back to look at it again. But because it came out in the collection, and because I am a completionist, and because I've been reappraising David Lynch over the last few years, obviously gave this another spin, and it turned out to be one of the best damn movies I've ever seen. This thing is amazing and fully recognized as should be in the canon. So there, and Cheryl Lee, who I never thought of anybody as just but that woman who played Laura Palmer at one point. Obviously I still think of her that way, but now I realize that this performance here is one of the finest I've ever seen put on film, and it's a goddamn shame that she hasn't had more of her career because of it. So that's why I feel that way about Twin Peaks. Next one I have here, maybe a little bit obvious, but the Apu trilogy. The Apu trilogy I find very, very important, and so happy that it's in the collection just because that this fulfills one of Criterion's mission statements, and that is bringing important films back, or not back into the collection, but bringing important films into the collection, giving them the care and attention that they need. And this is a series of films that for years I read about, and all you would ever really read was that there are really some really crappy VHS, maybe DVD copies out there. The originals were melted in a fire, and all of that, all the stories that we know. But when this finally came, and I was able to experience for the first time, this became one of the most impressive movie going experiences of my life, and watching this on a VHS, if and when I would have ever gotten around to it, would not have been half the experience, I don't think. So, and especially with all of the supplements that are around it to tell the whole story of this and Ray as well. Next one is another box set, and the reason I put this one in there is just pretty much just for the art. I grew up watching these types of movies, and I find the movies fun enough, but I really, really enjoy this being in the collection, and I really, really enjoy the fact that I own this just because of the presentation. These are amazing covers. It's an amazing box. It's amazing packaging, and it's just one hell of a lot of fun. The packaging, the Criterion's presentation, better than the movies? Probably, but still it adds to the enjoyment of them, and is kind of one of the prizes of my collection, and it's one that pops out at people quite a bit when they're looking at it. Anybody who's been following me at all probably knows that I'm a pretty big Orson Welles fan, but even with that, I don't think I'd even really barely heard of this F for Fake until it came out on Criterion back in the original DVD version, this being the Blu-ray, of course. This probably is my favorite Orson Welles movie, and the fact that it was brought to me by Criterion just goes to show that being a completionist and somebody who buys everything, a lot of times that you're going to find something that really fits your wheelhouse that you may not have come across before. And a bit about, completionism, when I was looking through the collection to find these few that I wanted to talk about, I was actually quite surprised at how few I came across as I scanned the shelves that I truly despise. Certainly a handful or less. So, this has been all around, this is a very, very worthwhile hobby for me. Next one, another box set, Andrew Vida, 3 war films. Boy, that pretty much just says it. Again, another director, another set, another genre, Polish war film that probably never would have crossed my door. Just going about my life, being a interested movie fan, but not always having the best stuff pointed out to me. Again, this being a Criterion box, and boy, do I wish this would have get upgraded one of these days. Again, there's only so many superlatives you can use, but again, another box set that just really blew my socks off. About 10 years ago, I found myself by myself for Christmas, and that was just through some unfortunate timing of this and that, families and all that, and decided on that Christmas day to watch Fanny Alexander, the television version, for the first time, and I had not actually watched much Bergman at the time. This has now become a tradition that I'd like to be able to pay more attention to. I've been able to watch this on Christmas Day probably 3 times over the last decade, and I will be very honest and say there have been Christmases that I wish there wasn't so much family around so that I could go back and spend the 5 to 6 hours to watch this. Not exactly a Christmas movie all the way through, but certainly starts that way, at least with part 1, and it just always puts me in that mood, and really shows me how powerful of a filmmaker Bergman is and was. Of course, the only mystery here is what the hell happened to spine, 262 or whatever it is, 265. Whatever spine they got rid of. I can't even remember what the number was anymore. So there, Fanny and Alexander, the television version. I have never watched the theatrical. I'll let Colonel Blimp pop in for my representative for Powell and Pressburger, mostly because I believe this, and I Know Where I'm Going, is the first films of theirs that I watched back on, well, I Know Where I'm Going is still on DVD, but the Colonel Blimp, when it was on DVD, I was just so impressed with how richly colorful and fun a British movie from the war years could be. And of course on the Blu-ray it's 10 times that. But again, another movie, maybe not the filmmakers. I probably would have found Powell Pressburger at some point, but speaking specifically of this movie, this is not something that I would have quickly or randomly come across in my viewing. Of the first 200 Spines, certainly one of my favorites, Latrow. Out of print has been for a long time. I would love to see this come back. This is kind of represents for me one of the earlier Criterions that I watched that I was so surprised that they would put out something that's just kind of a basic and raw potboiler. Potboiler might not be the right word, but I think you understand what I mean. Just, something that is kind of base, but at the same time very, very interesting, very, very tough. It's one of those movies where way back when I first started watching foreign movies in Criterion, I was like, wow, foreign films can be just as fun as whatever else I'm watching on Saturday afternoon TV when I'm 9 years old. Very, very good movie. And I may have to pop this one in tonight. Just a couple left. Playtime. And you could probably say the whole Tati set, but this is one of my definitive movie-going experiences. I had the original DVD that I think I spent $70 for. I had the reissued DVD, and then I had the Blu-ray, and then of course the Tati set. And I've seen this in the theaters twice, once the French version and once the English or American version. And this is a movie that I cannot and will not ever get sick of. I could watch this once a month if I didn't have other things to watch. And again, probably would not have come across my table like it did as a Criterion edition that I went out and bought sight unseen. Here's a movie that made me learn how to watch Shakespeare. I've always had a problem with Shakespeare films in their native tongue, so to speak, because when I'm listening to it, it's hard to follow along for me. And when I read it, it's hard to process. But with this movie, I figured out that if I listen to it and turn on the English subtitles, if I can hear the inflection and read the words, I got it. I've got it lock, stock, and barrel, and it all makes sense. If you're having any problems with Shakespeare, take it from me, that may be the way to do it for you. This movie is absolutely beautiful, insanely and greatly constructed, and for the last 10 years, 8, 9, 10 years, my number one choice each and every year for wishing for a Blu-ray upgrade. And boy, a cover art upgrade as well. When I first started collecting Criterion, I had probably about a dozen. I had watched a few of them and then picked up Grand Illusion, which at the time I didn't realize, although it's spine number 1, I didn't realize at the time that a bunch of spines had come out before it. But once I realized that I had spine number 1, I went back and watched this right away so that I could ostensibly start at the beginning. And again, one of those movie-going experiences. I was pretty young in my foreign film watching, so a little harder to process. Much, of course, it's pretty darn easy these days. But one of the films I am so happy to have, I have this poster hanging on my wall at work, and it never ceases to get people to ask questions, and has never, I don't think, ever gotten somebody to watch the actual thing. But I keep trying. Grand Illusion still may still be my favorite Renoir, but I don't know about that. And finally, since we are talking, or I am answering Trevor's question, I'm going to throw one Eclipse set in there, and that is Eclipse 2, the documentaries of Louis Malle, and for a couple of reasons. One is, of course, I knew who Louis Malle was over the years, and watching documentaries of his, I mean, I had seen, what's it called again, God's Country, because it was filmed in my neck of the woods here in Minnesota. I had seen this on PBS in the 80s, but never really tied it to Malle. But being able to sit down and watch all of these 7, 8, 9, 10 hours just on the goings on in India of the late 60s, impressive set of films. And of course, the other reason I bring this up is because I was on the Eclipse Viewer podcast with this a couple years ago. We ended up doing 3 episodes to get through this, probably 4 or 4.5 hours long. Still one of the best, maybe the best podcast experience I've ever had. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of prep, but especially watching these films made it very, very easy. So, thank you, Trevor. So that's what I've got. I can't imagine anybody's still watching, but that's just about a dozen and a half reasons why I am extremely happy to be a Criterion